kafir written on his forehead, whether that mu'min is literate or illiterate, he'll still be able to read. So we send Abu Jahal to the eye specialist. Check out his eyes. Why can't he read? And the report comes back that his eyes are perfect. So now we are left with this problem. This man's eyes are perfect and he cannot read. And this man can read. Why? We now ask the question, do we have any other eyes beside these eyes? The modern world of modern Western education, the universities, they declare that these are the only eyes we have. The knowledge comes only from external observation and investigation and experimentation and rational inquiry. And knowledge does not come from any other source. If it does not qualify as knowledge, it belongs to Disneyland. But the Quran gives a different epistemology. The Quran says that in addition to our external sight, with our external eyes, we also have internal sight, that we have a capacity to acquire knowledge internally. In fact, it is external knowledge that is acquired, but internal knowledge is received. And so when Dajjal sees with the left eye, our interpretation is that he has external sight. He has the capacity to acquire knowledge externally, the scientific method. And when Dajjal is internally blind, when Dajjal is blind in the right eye, the implication is that he is internally blind. And that now expands our understanding of the jasad. That a jasad sitting on the throne not only does not have the capacity to think independently, not only does not have the freedom to choose independently, freedom of choice, free will, a self-directed will. But in addition to that, the jasad is devoid of internal, intuitive, spiritual insight. And so when we live in a world in which appearance and reality differ with each other, where things are not what they appear to be. I remember during the years that I lived in the United States, I was sent to a prison once a week, and it was a very, very rewarding experience for me, because after 200 years of liberation of slavery, when I went in the prison, I found the prisoners were all black and the officers were all white. So I realized slavery didn't end in the United States. And I would then ask them, because the room is filled, how many of you are Muslims? And it turns out that only a few of them are Muslims. When I'm finished with the male section, I go to the female section. And when I asked the woman present, how many of you are Muslims? None. So why have you come to Islamic service? Then they will say to me that, Sheikh, things are not what they appear to be. He looked so handsome. He was so, his words could deceive me. And I thought he was a prince. And Sheikh, after I married him, I realized that he wasn't a prince, he was a scorpion. This is the American woman speaking to me in an American prison and confessing to me that appearance and reality were different from each other. Things were not what they appear to be. And if you are to make an assessment of someone, you have to be able to penetrate beyond the external form, the handsome figure, to reach the internal substance of the person. And that requires you to have something called insight. It's not sold in the supermarket, and it's not sold in the stock market. And Dajjal does not have insight. And those who are transformed by Dajjal into jasads like himself would be a people devoid of insight. And so you can give them another 100 years, they'll still not be able to recognize what is happening in the world of money before their very noses. Yes, mysterious transformation taking place in the world of money, and they can't see it. How valid is this epistemology that comes from the Western world? And is the Western world the creation of Dajjal? We have a very interesting part of the session now for you. We return to that moment when they saw him crucified on the cross. And you know what the Quran says about that. I don't need to repeat it. Some of them wept because they followed him. And some of them celebrated, and they can't pin any label of anti-Semitism on me because this is the word of Allah, the Quran. They celebrated when they saw him crucified. They know now he could not have been the Messiah. The Roman government then expelled them all, lock, stock, and barrel. Those who celebrated are now no longer known as Israelites, they are now known as Jews, Al-Yahud. And those who wept are no longer known as Israelites, they are now known as An-Nasara, the Christians. This side is punished by Allah, cut into bits and pieces and scattered all over the world. They can never have a state. No. This side which wept is favored by Allah. And there is the hadith which you will read when my book is published, or maybe today it will be on my website, Constantinople in the Quran. Check it out. This on this side are favored by Allah to gain a city, Constantinople. And it becomes a Christian city without any fighting. And the three walls of the city fall. They say, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, and the first side fall, and then the second and the third. I don't know how long it took for the entire tree sides to fall. It may be three significant events in the history of Constantinople, but that's your homework. As soon as Constantinople became a Christian city, then the cry was heard that Dajjal has been released amongst your people. So now, Dajjal is going to seek to corrupt the Christians who believe in Jesus. And he gets to work, and eventually he does succeed. And we leave the hadith and we go to the Quran, and the Quran speaks about a city by the sea, Constantinople. And in the city are a people who are obliged to obey the law of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is that day when you are not allowed to work, and hence you're not allowed to fish. We're not going to discuss the subject about the Sabbath being on Saturday or on Sunday. We leave that out. So in this city are an Israelite people who are now Christians, and they're not allowed to fish. So the Quran says that Allah tested them, that He would send the fish on the day of the Sabbath, and they would be jumping, and you could see them, and some of them big like this. You catch a fish like that, you go back home, your wife will be very happy. But this is the Sabbath day, you're not allowed to fish. And on every other day of the week, the fish would not come. And that's a terrible trial, for a fisherman. Some of them passed the test and remained faithful to the law, and therefore to the Lord God, and did not fish. But others went fishing. Others went fishing. Dajjal had so corrupted them that they were abandoning the law that came from the Lord God. Allah then responded in a great anger against them. He said to them, Kunu kiradatan khasi'in, be apes, despised. Now, nowhere in the Quran do we find this language. In the Quran we find Mathaluhum kamathalil kalb. They are a people who are like dogs. In the Quran we find Ulaika kal an'am. They are like cattle. But Allah never says they are dogs. And He never says they are cattle. Mathaluhum kamathalil ladhina kamathalil himar. They are like donkeys. If you have the book of Allah and you do not live in accordance with the guidance, it's like a donkey with a load of books on its back. So the language in the Quran is always, you are like cattle, you are like dogs, you are like donkeys, but never, never, never a human being that you're a dog, you're cattle, you're a donkey, never. But now, for the first time in the Quran, Kunu kiradatan khasi'in, be apes, despised. Is it possible that a human being can be transformed into an ape? Not according to the Quran. Not according to the Quran. A human being is created as a human being and remains a human being until Judgment Day. So then, these people could not have been transformed into apes. Of course, you know, schoolboys would say lots of things. But then, is the way of life of the apes, is it something despicable? No. An ape is naked. But there is nothing despicable or shameful in an ape being naked. No, it's his way of life, his fitrah. An ape conducts his sexual life in public. But there is nothing shameful or disgraceful in that, because he's an ape, that's his way of life. Well then, what does it mean? Kunu kiradatan khasi'in. Be apes despised. Answer: the explanation is that you who was created by Allah as a human being, and who was honored by Allah, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, to live an honorable way of life as a human being. You now descend, ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ السَّافِلِينَ. You now descend to live like the apes. An ape has no distinction between public space and private space, no? But a human being has a distinction between public space and private space. And a human being does not come out naked in public space. No. A human being does not engage in sexual relations in public space. So when you find a people, and I have to restrain my tongue now not to speak too harshly, when you find a people showing a preference for public nudity, that's the ape. When you find a people showing a preference for sexual activities in public, these are the apes. These are the ones who have been cursed by Allah. These are the ones who are living a despicable way of life. And where are they today? They left Constantinople. Constantinople was divided into two, and the Quran now uses the term Rome. And there's Rome of the East, which believes in Jesus as the Son of God, and which worships Jesus, and which believes in a Trinity long before the Quran was revealed, and they call Rome. And even though they worship Jesus as God and the Son of God, and even though they believe in the Trinity, yet when this part of Rome was defeated by the Persian Empire, Allah responded and said, غُلِبَتِ الرُّومُ, Rome has been defeated. وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبِهِمْ سَيَغْلِبُونَ. But within a few years, فِي بِضْعِ سِنِينَ, this Rome which was defeated will be victorious. بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ. Because لِلَّهِ الْأَمْرُ. It is Allah who has the authority to deliver victory. And Allah has ordained victory for them, even though they're worshipping Jesus as God, and they believe in Him as the Son of God, and they believe in the Trinity. Excuse me for the noise I'm making. Excuse me because some people have peanuts in their head, and they will not take the time to study the Quran. If I teach the Quran to you and I'm wrong, correct me. But if you cannot correct me and I teach you the Quran and you are confused, is that my problem or yours? This is Rome. This is Rome which has already been corrupted in their belief system, that they believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and they believe that He is the third person in the Trinity. And yet Allah says, Lillahi al-amr, Allah is the one who ordains victory, and Allah has ordained victory for them. And the Quran goes on to say, and I have to hurry up now, min qabla wa min ba'd, that there will be two victories for Rome, one before and one after. And the word before and after makes sense only if there's something in between. There's a victory before and there's a victory after, and something in between. And I understand, this is my opinion, you don't have to accept it. That which is in between, min qabl or min ba'd, before and after, is the great schism of 1054. When one part of Rome broke away, came to the west. And it is from this part of Rome, which came to the west, that modern Western civilization emerged. It is this part of Rome which has abandoned the law and they go fishing. They go fishing on the day of the Sabbath. And they have abandoned the law to such an extent that now a man can marry another man and get a marriage certificate. So we who have the Quran, we have a duty to go to the British people and the American people and the French people and the German people and the Australians, those who identify themselves to belong to this civilization created by Dajjal, and gently try to bring them back to their own religion. Come back to your religion. In your religion, there is a sacred law. I had dinner with Greek Orthodox Christians in Huddersfield, which is close to Leeds. And they were all very highly qualified Orthodox Greek Christians. And I had to say to them at the end of the day, don't be offended if your brother Muslim comes to you to tell you, come back to your law, because you have abandoned the law. Dajjal, therefore, is the author of this civilization which came out of Rome, in which today the law is now gone, and there is public nudity. And they even infiltrated the Gilets jaunes. You know what is Gilets jaunes? The Gilets jaunes in France? The Gilets jaunes are shaking Macron. Yes, the whole country. Gilet jaune, gilet is the vest, jaune is yellow. So they call the gilet jaune the yellow vest. And they're all over France now, shaking up the city. So now the newest thing is that the women now come to infiltrate the gilet jaune with part of their public nakedness. This is the apes. And from this civilization now, Dajjal now pursues his mission to rule the world from Jerusalem. In the last session, we spoke about the 3 stages: a day like a year, a day like a month, a day like a week. And in all of these stages, he is not in our world of space and time, because his day is not like our day. But after the 3rd stage has ended, وَسَائِرُ أَيَّامِهِ كَأَيَّامِكُمْ. Bismillah. Lemon and honey. So, this is a hadith. Dajjal has 3 stages, and after which he will appear in our world in human form. And you see him as a Jew, a young man, powerfully built, with the curls at the side. We go to Suratul Mursalat of the Quran, and this is a verse which has to be interpreted. Mutashabihat. And Allah says, Intaliku ila zillin zi salasi shu'ab. Proceed now to a shadow which will have 3 parts, 3 stages. A shadow has to be a shadow of something. That thing is hiding itself, and you're only seeing the shadow. And the shadow will appear in 3 parts, after which there will be no more shadow. I say that the Quran is telling us that a shadow is going to come over the world. And that shadow will appear in 3 stages. And at the end of the 3rd stage, the shadow is gone and you see the person himself who's creating the shadow. I now remember that famous scholar, Dr. Israr Ahmad, rahimahullah, who spoke. He didn't have an eschatology. So he could not connect this with this verse with Dajjal. No, he didn't have an eschatology. But these were his words. He said that coming events cast their shadows before them. And so he's saying to us that although Dajjal is not here, Dajjal has cast his shadow. This is it. And those were beautiful words of him. May Allah have mercy on the soul of Dr. Israr. And nobody ever spoke like that. Nobody. And this is exactly what Allah has said in the Quran. We recognize that the shadow in Surah Al-Mursalat is the shadow of Dajjal. And it will appear in 3 parts, at the end of which you see Dajjal himself, no more shadow. I came to the conclusion, that the island of Tamim-ud-Dari was Britain, and that when Dajjal was released in a day which is like a year, it is from Britain that he will commence his mission to rule the world from Jerusalem. And therefore it is from Britain that modern Western civilization emerged. Yes, Italy played its part because they called it the Renaissance, and the great sculptures of Italy, which are celebrated, is part of the process of the creation of this modern Western civilization. I went to the Botanic Gardens in Glasgow, and as I was walking around the gardens, all of these beautiful sculptures, but strangely, none of them had clothes on. They're all naked. Then a bell clicked. It clicked. Oh, I see. It is a process of stage by stage. You first produce the statue naked before you can come out in person naked. But Leonardo da Vinci, was it he? He did the worst thing all. He took a prophet of Allah, Nabi Dawood alayhi salam, David, and he made a sculpture of David, tout nu, completely naked. And this is the great Renaissance. So yes, Italy had its part, and France had its part, because it was from Toulouse that the Crusades were launched. Toulouse, the first crusade. But it is Britain par excellence which initiated modern Western civilization. And at the heart of modern Western civilization is a scientific and technological revolution. Oh yes. And Britain is the one which initiated that scientific and technological revolution, and industrial revolution, and feminist revolution, etc. And if you were born in Britain, you got an advantage over those who were born in Pakistan. Shall I tell you that? If you were born in Britain, just make sure that your wife and your children are safe. And once your wife and children are safe, then utilize the opportunity you have for being in Britain to study the scientific and technological revolution. If you're in Manchester and you've not studied the Industrial Revolution, were you only eating biryani and going home and sleep? Huh? So many revolutions came out of this island. And I am coming from the Caribbean island of Trinidad to come and teach you. Well, you should be studying yourself here with my Caribbean accent. Is there anything in the Quran that allows us to understand the scientific and technological revolution which produced Pax Britannica? Pax Britannica, Britain becomes a ruling state in the world. And then Pax Americana, United States succeeding Britain as a ruling state in the world. The political scientist cannot explain it. No. He cannot explain how an island which never walked on the stage of the world suddenly takes over from Spain, from Portugal, from Holland, who were ruling states. Spain was more powerful than Britain. Holland was more powerful. Portugal was more powerful. In fact, the Pope divided the world into two, half for Spain, half for Portugal. And then suddenly Britain emerges as the most powerful state, and Britain rules the world for 300 years. Pax Britannica. From whence the scientific and technological revolution? At the heart of the scientific and technological revolution is speed. Where yesterday you take 1,000 camels, and the 1,000 camels will have to walk for one month to carry all of these loads. Now suddenly you capture the power of steam. And with the capture of the power of steam through coal, and you create the train. And the train takes over from 1,000 camels. Okay? And then from the train, you get the motor car, and then you get the aeroplane. And no more. Nobody using ships anymore to travel. Ships are only cruise liners for, honeymoons, that's all. And for cargo. That's what ships for, not for travel. At the heart of the scientific and technological revolution is speed. And the Quran tells us about Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam. That Allah has forced the jinn to work for him. And those jinn are shayateen, Satan's devils. And if they do not work for him, they'll be punished. Okay? This is in Surah As-Sad. And Sulaiman alayhi salam gets to know about a woman ruling. Oh, but Allah did not create women to rule. Allah says in the Quran, and when I write my book on Dajjal and the feminist revolution, I know I'm going to get into trouble. But the truth has to be told, regardless of consequences. Yes. I am not going to be intimidated. The truth has to be told from the Quran, regardless of consequences. If I am wrong, correct me. And if I am not wrong and I'm teaching you the Quran and you are confused, that's your problem, not mine. So he learned that there was a woman ruling in Yemen, and that she had a wonderful throne, and that they were worshipping the sun. And he sent a message to them to submit to the one God, otherwise I'm coming for you. So she sent some gifts for him. He said, I don't need your gifts. What Allah has given me is far better. You better come quickly, otherwise I'm coming with my army. And then he spoke to the people in his court, and he asked, who can bring me her throne before she arrives? Hey, wait a minute. From Jerusalem to Yemen is 2,000 kilometers. 2,000 kilometers. One of the jinn who is the most powerful of all, is called Ifrit. He says, I can bring that throne for you before you rise from your cot. Astonishing. 2,000 kilometers. And not only can the jinn travel at tremendous speed, but they can cause objects to be taken through space at tremendous speed. And these jinn have to work for Suleiman. If they don't, Allah will punish them. Now these jinn, who are shayateen, when Suleiman died, they didn't know he was dead, because they saw someone sitting on his throne, holding on to his staff. And they thought this was Suleiman, because the staff had miraculous qualities. But with the staff, they could not recognize that this was not Suleiman. What time we started? 2:30? And it's 3:15? I have only 15 minutes left? My gosh. So, Dajjal is sitting on the throne. And he has the power to get work from this shayateen, the jinn. And the jinn have this capacity to travel at tremendous speed and to cause objects to move at tremendous speed. And so the scientific and technological revolution which made Western civilization so powerful has within it the assistance of those jinn. But that's not the whole story. When the Ifrit said, I can bring the throne faster than you can rise from your cot, someone else spoke, who is not a jinn. No. And this person has access to a book. And it's not the Quran, it's not the Injil, it's not the Torah, it's another book. And in this book is knowledge pertaining to travel through space and time. And therefore the scientific and technological revolution in this book. And he said to Suleiman alayhi salam, I can bring that throne to you faster than you can even wink your eyes. I don't think NATO is very happy at all about this. I don't think that NATO is happy at all about this. Shall I repeat it one more time? Will you learn to think? Will you learn to think that there is knowledge that if Allah gives you access to it, will supersede everything that has come out of modern Western civilization in terms of travel through space and time. And that's why today the United States of America spent, oh my gosh, how much money they spent on even one aircraft carrier. One. An enormous amount of money. And they built more aircraft carriers than anybody else in the whole world combined. And today, all those aircraft carriers are now obsolete. When the war begins, they have to hide them. They can't bring them out in the open. Why? Because Allah has allowed some people access to that knowledge. And they have now become the dominant military power in the world. And they can destroy an aircraft carrier like that. That's why the president of Russia said, we can destroy the whole of the United States in half an hour. So modern Western civilization is the product of Dajjal. And from it emerged Britain as a ruling state. And while Britain was a ruling state, we saw We saw the pawns being moved on the chessboard, which eventually led to the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and to a British army liberating the Holy Land for the Jews, and then to a state of Israel being born in the Holy Land with British blessing. And then came Dajjal's day like a month, when Pax Americana replaced Pax Britannica. And now Israel becomes more and more powerful. There is an obsession with Israel from the side of the United States. And then comes a time when the third stage of the process is to take place. And Pax Americana will be in irreversible decline. You cannot find this from the Department of Political Science of any university. They do not have the capacity to deliver this analysis that we deliver from eschatology. The United States of America is now in irreversible decline. We can speak and speak with certainty because we have eschatology. And when the Americans ride out into the sunset and Pax America is gone, there will have to be a third ruling state. First Britain, then the United States. So Israel now replaces the United States. And Israel now seeks to become the ruling state in the world. But before Britain could become the ruling state in the world, great wars had to be fought. Great wars. And before the United States became the ruling state in the world, succeeding Britain, Pax Americana, you had to have the First World War and the Second World War. And so now clearly, before Israel can replace the United States of America, and a Pax Judaica replace Pax Americana, you need great war. And our prophet has spoken and said that there will precisely be this great war. And this is our our last session today. It's called the Great War. In Islam we call it the Malhama. But the Christians call it Armageddon. We find something common to all three parts of the shadow. And it's not just the scientific and technological revolution, which is still unfolding. Your smartphone is not the end of the world. There's something more coming. What is common to all three is a mysterious change taking place in the world of money, which is our next session. That if you want to rule the world, you must take charge of the world of money. I didn't say it, Rothschild said it. He said, I don't care who rules the kingdom as the king, just give me control over money and I'll rule the world. And so now we see Dajjal seeking to rule the world from Jerusalem, and this is his political strategy. And in that political strategy of Pax Americana, Pax Britannica, Pax Americana, Pax Judaica, you also have his economic strategy with riba, and his monetary strategy with removal of gold and silver and replace that with paper money. But Dajjal has yet one more weapon in his effort to rule the world. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, the last people to come out to Dajjal will be women. And a man would have to return to his home and tie, meaning coercively restrain his wife, his daughter, to protect them from being seduced by Dajjal. I have, inshallah, the plan to write a book on Dajjal and the feminist revolution. And I have 6 minutes to give you a summary of that, so you can sympathize with me. In the Quran, Allah speaks with great beauty, and He says, وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى. He takes an oath by the night, and by that which the night shrouds, covers so mysteriously, so beautifully, enchantingly beautiful. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى. And He takes an oath by the day, and by its bright light, nothing concealed, nothing covered, nothing shrouded, nothing mysterious. And then He goes on to say, وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. That in the same way that I created the night and the day, so too did I create the male and the female. But there are those who lust for knowledge from CNN and from television, and who disrespect the Quran, and who have no consideration for knowledge in the Quran, and who want to argue with you from now until sunset. And we say to them, history is leaving you behind and going ahead. We don't have time for you. That's our answer to them. That in the same way that Allah created the male and the female, in the same way that Allah created the night and the day, so too did He create the male and the female. The day has its own functions, and the night has her own functions. They are functionally different. But no one says, except of course a schoolboy, that the day is superior to the night, or the night is superior to the day, or the day and the night have an equal sign between them. Only a schoolboy talks like that. The scholar, the one who's learned, would say, no, day and night are complementary. This one cannot function without this one, and this one cannot function without this. They're interdependent, they're complementary. Similarly, the male has his functions to perform in society, and the female has her functions to perform in society. It is because she has immensely important functions to perform, she doesn't have to bother about her livelihood. No, a woman does not have to bother about her livelihood. Where am I going to get the money to pay for the rent and pay for the groceries and pay for this and that and the other? A woman does not have that responsibility, because Allah says, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men have that responsibility to maintain women. When you neglect a child and you put the child in a daycare center, or you put the child with a babysitter, or you put the child with granny, or you put the child with the next door neighbor, and I have to restrain myself not to shout. My wife's going to be angry with me if I shout. Because in the past I used to shout, yeah. you put the child anywhere because you have a career to pursue. And as a consequence of pursuing this career, the child is neglected. Ask the child, do you prefer the daycare center or mommy? And the child is only 6 weeks old. 6 weeks old. Do you prefer the daycare center or mommy? Guess what the child will say? When you neglect them in this way, because the night wants to become day. That is what the child is doing. The night wants to become day. And as a consequence of the night wanting to become day, the day decides, well, I don't have to maintain them anymore. Yeah, you have men like that today. You want to become my wife? How much are you making? I didn't hear. How much are you making if you want to become my wife? Did you hear that? These are not men. These are not men. These are rats. How much are you making? That's not a man, that's a rat. Asking her, how much are you making? So now, the Prophet said, women will dress like men, and men will dress like women. And so society is collapsing. He said women will be dressed and yet naked, which is the apes. The apes. And when the children grow up neglected, then they turn to drugs, they turn to lesbianism and homosexuality, they turn to sexual promiscuity, they turn to alcohol, they turn to gambling, and to disrespect for elders. Don't be surprised. And then when Papa and Mama grow old, they say to them, well, you were busy, you had to go to work, and you put us in the daycare center. Now we have to go to work, so we're going to put you in a junkyard for old people. This is the glorious conclusion to which modern Western civilization has arrived. From what we had before, which was so much more intelligent and beneficial and brought more happiness and peace to society. So I've given you a taste, not more than that, while you were enjoying your... Oh, you finished eating now, eh? I've given you a taste of Dajjal's strategy. In Latin it's called Modus Operandi, but Faisal didn't know the meaning. His method of operation, I call it his footprints. How he seeks to achieve his objective of ruling the world from Jerusalem. We're going to end now this second session, and we have half an hour for question and answer. Yeah. Okay? Okay. Thank you. Bismillahi awwaluhu wa akhir. If you put your email address, and I don't have the time to answer now, I will answer, inshallah, and send you an email, okay? This one is, made me smile, in fact made me laugh. Because of riba, which is permeating society now, it is very hard to survive on one income. And women are often forced to work to make ends meet. So shall I ask my husband for a divorce? And look for a man who can provide for me, so I can bring up my children on the Sirat al-Mustaqim. This is a big problem. Because of riba, today our people live in miserable poverty. Our daughters are prostitutes, our daughters. Our sons are now working as beggars all over the world, our sons. Pumping gasoline, doing the job that nobody else does in order to survive. Our sons have to leave Africa, leave Asia, leave Algeria, leave Morocco and come to other parts of the world where the money is in order to survive, okay? This is riba. And I have been teaching the subject for 20 years or more. And after all of this time, I have failed and failed miserably in getting the scholars of Islam to wake up. And it seems as though I can continue for another 20 years, and they will not wake up. Yes. For mysterious reasons, yes. So, what I'm now doing is trying to create a new generation of scholars of Islam. And hope and pray that tomorrow they will be able to stand up. The Prophet ﷺ had a daughter whose name was Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha. And she was married to his cousin Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. But Ali was poor. And husband and wife would go to the forest and cut wood and make bundles of wood and bring them on their backs to sell in the market. And so it is possible for husband and wife to join together when the husband by himself is not capable. You don't have to get a divorce. You could try to help him as best as possible, okay? But at the time of marriage, a husband is obliged to ensure he has the means to maintain a wife. That does not mean that you're going to be maintaining her with chicken and duck and lamb every day of the week. You know, you can eat dal and roti. Yes, and be content with that. But a husband must be able to maintain a wife before he can marry her. And if your husband does not have the means to maintain you, you have the option of seeking a divorce. Oh yes. So that you can have a husband who can maintain you, so that you could devote your attention to your children. And that's a full-time job. That's a full-time job. If I am doing the work I'm doing now, because my mother devoted attention to me. If my mother was at work working, coming home in the evening, a professional woman, Imran would not be here today doing the work that he's doing. So we have to pray for Allah's blessings on my mother. My father was a school principal, and alhamdulillah, he brought home enough income for us to eat and live our lives, okay? How do we respond to this subject now of riba? The answer has to be, this is our next session on riba, our answer has to be that we have to look for a micro solution to the problem, because the macro is not possible. Let's leave that for the next session, inshallah. If family members cannot see the fitna of Dajjal, what is the best approach to helping them see the past deception. And if they still cannot, what do you suggest as an approach? If you are on board a ship and the ship is sinking, and you know it's sinking, and nothing can prevent the ship from sinking, nothing. It is destined to sink. And when it sinks, you're going to take all on board, all will die. What do? Answer, you get off the ship. But if you have family members, you have your father, your mother, you have your wife, you have your children, and they don't want to get off. No, they're partying. Until early hours of the morning, they're partying. What do? Answer, when you have failed in trying to get them to get off the ship, you get off the ship, with or without them. Because when you are off the ship, you now have a chance of trying to get them to come off the ship. So long as you remain on board the ship, you and them all are going down. But if you get off the ship, you say to your wife, well, sorry, I'm going. If you want to stay, the children, sorry, I'm going. Papa is going. If you want to stay, that's your choice. You have to use this wisdom to get off the ship. And when you get off the ship, now you have to set a model for them that will be impact upon them. Okay? If you can get a few families to join with you and find land in the remote countryside and build simple homes and get animals and produce your own food and milk and meat, okay, and live as a community as you used to live before, when they see that, then the possibility exists that they may come and join you. Those who've already been brainwashed by Dajjal, who are now, listen to my words, addicted to the fast lane, they will not be able to spend even one night with you in the remote countryside. They say, if we stay here, we'll die. Life is too slow over here. They cannot live. They might have to be sent to a mental hospital. But if they have not as yet been so drugged and brainwashed by the fast lane of life, then little by little their hearts will become accustomed and acclimatized, and they will find peace and happiness in the remote countryside. That's how you deal with your family. Has Ghazwatul Hind already taken place? Can I skip this? Because I want to control my temper. Which book does Russia have? The book is in Surah Al-Saba. Is it Saba? Yes, I think it is Saba. Any Hafiz of the Quran? No. Surah Al-Naml. Naml, yeah. In Surah Al-Naml, the Ifrit of the jinn says, I can bring the throne to you before you rise from your cot. Then one who has the knowledge of the book, that's all the Quran says, nothing else. He says, I can bring that throne for you in the twinkling of an eye. The Quran does not tell us more about the book. But you don't need a PhD to understand that in that book is knowledge pertaining to travel through space and time. And therefore, at what speed can a missile fly? At what speed can a bullet fly? And if you have access to that book, then you will be able to have a military advantage over a civilization which is dependent on the jinn. Because the jinn will be able to bring the throne in a time less than how much time it will take to rise from your cot. When we look at the world today, Russia has risen like a phoenix, I think it's called, from what it was after the Soviet Union collapse. You cannot explain Russia's military dominance in the world today, because Russia is the dominant military power in the world today. And that is about to be shown in the Great War. And Allah is going to intervene in that Great War as well. That's my book at the back, the Quran, the Great War in the West. So I am confident that Russian scientists are being blessed by Allah to have access to that knowledge in the book. Allah has His ways in which He sends knowledge, yes. I get knowledge all the time, and it comes like a flash to me. It comes like a flash to me. It's happening to me all my life. So Allah can send knowledge to you in ways in which you can receive that knowledge. And that is the explanation for Russia's military ascendancy today. Could you please explain if the Torah is the specific book or a collection of books? I know nothing other than what is available publicly. The scholar of the Torah will have to answer that question. What I know, and I can be wrong, is that there are 5 books of Moses. And these 5 books, or the Pentateuch it's called, constitute the Torah. But I can be wrong. I know about the Quran. According to Islam, is it okay for there to be no hijab between men and women? I allowed the organizers here. I did not intervene in the seating arrangements, okay? I allowed them to decide how they have to arrange the seating accommodation. The normal way would be you follow what Allah has given in the Quran. And in the Quran there is no hijab, no partition, no screen, no barrier, no wall between men and women. None, 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 none. Men and women pray in the same space. Absolutely. Men and women pray in the same space. And this is why the Prophet said, when the women come, the best row for a woman is the last row. And when the men come, the best row for the men is the first row. Allah in His wisdom, I know I'm going to make you smile now, but never mind. Allah in His wisdom decided to put the men at the front and the women at the back. And that was very wise, because if He had put the women at the front and the men at the back, no man would be able to pray. So it's better that the women at the back and the men at the front. This is not meaning that men are superior to women. But He said that when you go down in sajda, sajda is prostration, He said the woman must remain in sajda longer than the men. Why? Because, He said, some of the men may not have enough cloth to cover themselves. So what is He talking about? In those days, men never used Toyota Camrys, they used horses and donkeys. So you have to climb onto the animal. So a man would have 2 pieces of clothing, like the Pakistani shalwar kameez. One, which is the lower part, which is tailored in such a way that you could put your leg over the animal. And the other is the upper part. So what he meant was the upper garment might not be long enough to cover you when you go down in sajda. And if it is not long enough, it may be an unwelcome sight for a woman. So he said the woman must remain in sajda longer than the men. This is there in Sahih Muslim. So was there a shortage of cloth? Why did they not take some branches from the palm trees and make a screen? They could have done that. And there are, of course, people now who will teach the Prophet how to teach. What is the religion? We have people like that who want to teach him what is Islam. No, they didn't have a shortage of branches. It was Allah's wisdom that men and women should pray in the same space. That's right. And the women at the back and the men at the front. And he said that row which has the greatest danger for the woman is the front row. And that row which has the greatest danger for the men will be the last row, because of the physical proximity. You're close to each other. So sparks can fly when you're close to each other. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ asked that the women should stay in sajda longer than men. So when we have a public gathering, this is how we should be. The men would sit at the front, the women at the back. But today, because of Dajjal's feminist revolution, there'll be women who'll be so offended that they'll actually take a flight and fly back home. They are so offended. Because for them, we are being treated in an undignified way, being subjected to the back when men are at the front. What can I do with this kind of brainwashing? Is womb transplantation Dajjal's fitna? Now what you do is send me an email, whoever it is, and I will then direct you to Professor Dr. Abul Fadl Mohsin Ibrahim, who is my very dear brother, and who is the specialist in Islamic medical ethics. I am not that specialist. We are in a time where women have to work and men, or rather males, stay sleeping at home. Really? Men sleeping at home, women at work. It seems as though that the prophecy is fulfilled, because he said that men will dress like women. He said women will dress like men, meaning women will seek to assume the functional role of men in society. And he said men will dress like women, meaning men will abandon their functional role in society of maintaining women. Do you think a woman should accept the situation? No. Put your trust in Allah. Put your trust in Allah. And do not subject yourself to oppression. No. Do not allow yourself to be oppressed. No. It's better to be alone as a woman without a husband than to be a woman who is oppressed, that you have to work to maintain him. When do you think Israel will conquer the oil fields of Saudi Arabia outright? Leave this for the last session, when we deal with the end time, the end of history. Is the dowry given by women in India coming from Dajjal? In Islam, you do not buy a woman when you marry her. No. It's not a bride price. A woman has the right at the time of marriage to ask for a dowry, which gives her, number one, some security, and number two, gives her the right to own property in her own name. If you want a loan from her, you better ask for it respectfully, because you have no right to her wealth. None. She has a right to your wealth. She has a part of what you earn. You have to maintain her. What is his, and what is hers. And this giving of the dowry to her symbolizes her right to own property in her own name. However, now we live in a world of schoolboys. So when she wants to get married, her parents have to find a refrigerator and a washing machine and a bedroom set and this and that and the other before he agrees to the marriage. I don't know where this crookedness came from which garbage bin. But this is not Islam, and shame, 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 shame on those who demand such things from women before you marry them. Shame on you! You're not men, you're rats. This being the scientific and technological age, what is your view on the interpretation of the Quran being analyzed by some in a scientific manner? Of course there are verses of the Quran which have to be understood in terms of modern science, of course. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have just done that for you with the space and time, travel through space and time. And I have come to the conclusion that you cannot explain Russia's meteoric rise in just a short span of time to achieve now a military ascendancy that has left all the American aircraft carriers obsolete. This is an amazing event in military history. So yes, we do have to interpret and explain and analyze some verses of the Quran in terms of scientific knowledge. Is it bad to send kids to nursery? No, kids, only goats and Americans have kids. Only goats and Americans have kids. Rest of us have children. So if you have kids, you're either a goat or an American. Up to the age of 4, the British, in their wisdom, put it at 5. The British, in their wisdom, put it at 5. For us, it's a little bit before 5, 4.5 or so. A child should be left free like the butterflies in the garden. After that age, the child should be left free like the butterflies in the garden. You do not restrict and restrain the child at that age. Let the child dance, let the child sing, let the child fly, let the child enjoy herself at this time. These are the flowers of your garden, your children at this age. You will teach the child sitting on your lap, not in a classroom. No. And when the time comes for formal education to begin, now no more of the butterfly flying anymore for the child. That life is gone now. Now it's formal education. And the child has to study the Quran. That is the first step of knowledge in Islam. First step in education in Islam. Okay? If you want to send your child to a nursery because you got to go to school, I mean you got to go to work, or you want some free time at home, you want free time at home, so you send your child away. I told you being a woman is a full-time job. And you will have to answer on Judgment Day. You will have to answer. You will have to answer on Judgment Day for your children. Be careful, be careful, be careful for that child. Because one wrong step on your part for that child, and you can create a criminal. You can create someone who is mentally unbalanced. Yes. And that child is destroyed. Be careful, be careful, be careful. Keep your children at home. Let your children enjoy their childhood, okay? Until the time comes for formal education to begin. In India and Pakistan, I don't know about the Arab world, they say 4 years, 4 months, 4 days. And then they have the Bismillah, where the child is dressed up. I don't know whether you still do it. You dress up the child very nicely, and the Ustad comes and there's a copy of the Quran, and the child begins, formal now, begins to recite the Quran, and this is the beginning of the process of education in Islam. Not dress up in a tie and go to school. This is the beginning, okay? All right, we are now at 4 o'clock. It's time for Salatul Maghrib, and we return at 4:30, inshallah.